Every few years, a talent competition produces a moment that stops the world in its tracks. Sometimes it is a voice that defies all expectation. Sometimes it is a performer who moves in a way no one has ever seen before. But on June 12, 2018, America's Got Talent delivered something far rarer. A moment that would be talked about for years, replayed hundreds of millions of times, and debated long after the confetti had settled. A 13-year-old girl from a small town in England walked onto one of the biggest stages in television history, and what she did next left an entire country speechless. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and the story of what happened to her after that night is one of the most complicated, painful, and ultimately inspiring journeys in modern pop culture. When Courtney walked out onto the America's Got Talent stage, she looked like any other nervous teenager. She could barely raise her voice to speak to the judges. Mel B had to gently encourage her just to begin. Courtney had chosen Otis Redding's Hard to Handle, a classic soul track that demands swagger, confidence, and control. From a trembling 13-year-old who could hardly make eye contact, it seemed like an almost impossible choice. Then the music started. The shy teenager disappeared completely. What replaced her was something the judges had never seen from someone that age. Her voice was raw and powerful. Her movement was electric. She dropped to her knees mid-performance, prompting Simon Cowell to exclaim under his breath. Howie Mandel immediately compared her to Janis Joplin. Mel B looked as though she could not believe what she was witnessing. When the song finally ended, the audience rose to its feet as one. Howie Mandel did not wait for deliberation. He walked straight to the golden buzzer and pressed it, sending Courtney directly to the live shows. Backstage, he declared it the most exciting moment of his life on the show. He compared her to Darcy Lynn Farmer, the season 12 winner, and predicted Courtney would be this year's champion. It was the third time Mandel had used his golden buzzer on a singer who went on to become a frontrunner, the previous being Grace VanderWaal, who had won season 10. The audition was broadcast live to over 11 million viewers on NBC. But the real shockwave came online. Within 1 week, the video had been watched more than 130 million times across social media and streaming platforms. That number would eventually surpass 250 million views, making it one of the most watched auditions in the show's history. Overnight, Courtney Hadwin was no longer just a shy teenager from County Durham. She was a global phenomenon. As the season progressed, Courtney continued to deliver. In the quarterfinals, she performed James Brown's Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and earned standing ovations from all 4 judges. She advanced to the semifinals, where she took on Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild, complete with her signature high-pitched screams and untamed stage energy. Howie Mandel told her once again that she would win the whole competition. Simon Cowell described her as a bundle of excitement, raw, messy, and completely alive on stage. He said he had watched her shaking like a leaf before the performance and then seen her transform into something else entirely. That, he said, was why he loved her. In the finale, she performed alongside the band The Struts and then delivered a stunning rendition of Janis Joplin's Piece of My Heart. Every indicator pointed toward a Courtney Hadwin victory. She had the views, the votes, the praise, and the momentum. She was the frontrunner from the very first audition. When the results were announced, the audience at the Dolby Theater was left in stunned silence. Courtney Hadwin had finished in 6th place. The winner was Shin Lim, a close-up magician. A journalist present that night later reported that the gasps from the crowd were deafening when Courtney's name was called in elimination. Fans flooded Twitter with disbelief, calling the result absurd and expressing shock that she had not even made the top 5. The girl, who was supposed to win, went home without a trophy. But what happened next was far more devastating than losing a competition. After the finale, the record deals came fast. Simon Cowell partnered with Arista Records to sign Courtney to a multi-contract deal announced on December 17, 2018. Courtney was 14 years old. She spoke publicly about feeling incredibly lucky and excited. Cowell said he would never forget her first audition and called it fantastic that they now had the opportunity to work together. The excitement did not last. Shortly before Courtney's 16th birthday, everything collapsed. Psycho Music, Cowell's label imprint involved in the deal, began winding down its operations. Artists across the roster found themselves without label support almost overnight. Courtney, who had signed with the expectation of a full, major label push behind her career, was suddenly without a team and without a plan. The deal that was supposed to launch her into the stratosphere had simply folded. In interviews years later, she described the collapse as leaving her in a harder position than she had been in before America's Got Talent. She said she constantly felt like she had to prove herself even more than before, fighting for credibility that should have been building rather than eroding. Making matters worse, during the brief period the label was active, Courtney had been placed into writing camps with pop-oriented songwriters and producers who did not understand her sound. She described being given songs she could not relate to at all, music she characterized as pure pop that was simply not who she was. Her identity had been built on soul, blues, and rock and roll. She had discovered her musical voice watching black and white YouTube videos of James Brown, Tina Turner, Etta James, and Aretha Franklin. The moment she knew this was her path was after seeing a vintage performance of James Brown doing "I Got You, I Feel Good." That was her sound, but the industry wanted something safer, something more modern, and in the process, they nearly erased what made her extraordinary. During those years, the momentum from the Mo's while Courtney was struggling to find herself artistically, another battle was raging online. Viewers had discovered footage of her on The Voice Kids UK in 2017, where she had performed confidently and finished in the top 6. They compared that version of Courtney to the shy, barely speaking teenager who had stood trembling before the judges on America's Got Talent. The conclusion spread across social media within hours. She was a fraud. The nerves, they claimed, had been a deliberate performance designed to maximize shock value when she transformed on stage. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Twitter users posted side-by-side comparisons and called her act manufactured. Others echoed the accusations until they became the dominant narrative in certain corners of the internet. What the critics conveniently overlooked was that America's Got Talent had no rule against contestants with prior competition experience. Courtney was not breaking any rules and had not hidden anything. But online, facts rarely win against a compelling story. Her grandfather, Tom Story, came to her defense publicly, telling the press that the family had deliberately chosen to enter the American competition over Britain's Got Talent because they believed the American audience would better appreciate her rock and roll energy. They had been right about the reception. They had not anticipated the scrutiny that came with it. At just 14, Courtney responded with remarkable grace. She said America's Got Talent had taught her not to focus on the negative comments, only the positive ones. She thanked everyone who had voted and supported her. It was a composed, mature response from a teenager who had just been called a fraud by millions of strangers. But the school hallways were no safer than the internet. Even after becoming world famous, Courtney was bullied by classmates at her school in Heselden, County Durham. Her peers mocked her voice and called her names. Her parents had feared exactly this kind of attention and had tried their best to protect her. But when you are a teenager, there is no shield from the people you see every day. Between 2019 and 2022, Courtney Hadwin essentially vanished from public life. She was between 15 and 18 years old. T-Watched audition in America's Got Talent history had evaporated. The label had folded. The writing camps had produced nothing authentic. Fans assumed she had walked away from music entirely. She had not walked away. She was fighting to hold on to it. Those years were filled with writing. Courtney had begun working on what would eventually become her debut album, Little Miss Jagged, from around the age of 15. She used the process as a kind of diary, a way to process everything that had happened to her and everything she had lost. Songwriting had initially felt like something imposed on her by people who did not understand her. But gradually, it became the only way she could truly express herself. She later explained that she was never very good at talking about her feelings, so songwriting became that outlet. The songs from those years were not about fame or applause. They were about what happened when all of that went away. The turning point in her creative journey came when she was introduced to producer Kevin Bowe, who had credits working with Etta James and Joe Cocker. For the first time, Courtney was in a room with someone who genuinely understood the music she loved. Bowe encouraged her to contribute, to actually write alongside him rather than have everything handed to her. It was a different process, one that required her to open up in ways she had never been asked to before. Slowly, something shifted. Songwriting went from being a burden to being something she could not live without. The years of silence had a deeper cause beyond